My name is Rachna. A few months ago, my father passed away. Now it's just my mother and me. I had already completed my studies. We belonged to a middle-class family, and a lot of money had been spent on my father's treatment. Even after all that, he couldn't survive. After his death, our financial situation became extremely bad. My mother's health started deteriorating, and she could no longer work in people's homes. So, it was up to me to earn and run the household. I had no idea what kind of work I could do. Each day, our condition kept getting worse, and we didn't even have enough money to buy my mother's medicines. Finally, out of helplessness, I decided to start giving tuitions to children. But since our area was quite small, I couldn't find the kind of job I was looking for. I wanted a place where only women worked. Unfortunately, there was no such option nearby. Most jobs were dominated by men. My mother was strictly against me working outside. She would say, "Even if we have to die of hunger, there's no need for you to step out of the house." I obeyed her and stayed home for a while. But our worsening situation, not being able to buy her medicines on time, and the constant struggle, made both of us miserable. Gradually, we reached a point where we often had to go hungry. Ever since my father's death, peace and comfort had completely disappeared from our lives. The people in our area were as poor as we were. I wanted to teach the nearby children, but I knew that the families in my neighborhood couldn't afford to pay high tuition fees. And with such little money, it would have been impossible for me to manage my expenses, which were already quite high. Then one of my friends advised me, "Why don't you start giving home tuitions? If you go to students' houses to teach, you'll earn more." These days, because of safety and convenience, most parents prefer having their children tutored at home, and they're willing to pay extra for that. I looked into it further, and everyone I spoke to gave me the same advice, that giving home tuitions would be the best option for me, and it would also pay more. I was ready to do it, but my mother wouldn't let me go out of the house. After much convincing, I finally managed to persuade her. We had reached a point where we didn't even have enough to eat, so I had no choice but to do something. Eventually, even my mother gave in. I spoke to a few people I knew, and told them that if anyone needed a home tutor, they could contact me. Soon, I received a response, an offer from a well-off family who needed a tutor. In the beginning, I didn't really know what kind of conditions or terms I should set before starting. I simply told people that I was the only earning member in my family, that I was doing this job out of necessity because my father had recently passed away. I told them I really needed the money, but I also assured them that I would teach their children very well, and that they wouldn't find a better teacher than me anywhere else. Perhaps my mistake was that I had started revealing my weakness to others. My work had begun. Every day, from 2 o'clock in the afternoon until 8 o'clock in the evening, I went from house to house teaching children. I had managed to get 5 tuitions, each for 1 hour. One of my students was a boy named Katan, whom I taught from 7 to 8 in the evening. In the beginning, Katan used to talk to me in a rather strange manner. In that house, there was only one other person, Kitan's mother. He was their only child. Kitan was quite cheerful by nature. His mother told me he was their most beloved and only son. His father worked for a big company, which required him to travel frequently to other cities. I thought that was good. They seemed to be a wealthy family, and I was earning a decent amount teaching there. I had been teaching Katan for about 20 days when I noticed something unusual. Whenever I checked his homework notebook, I would find strange sketches drawn on the pages, odd lines and shapes that didn't make much sense to me. I was curious about what they meant, but I thought maybe Katan just drew them in his free time. Then one day, I happened to see even stranger drawings, weird-looking faces sketched in his notebook. When I mentioned this to his mother, she explained that her son was interested in becoming an artist. He wanted to be a painter someday. However, she said that she wanted him to first complete his higher education, so that later he could decide for himself what kind of career or business he wanted to pursue. I told her, "Your thinking is very good, but I believe that children should be allowed to do what they are truly interested in. If he wants to become an artist, you should support him. As soon as I said that, Caden's mother seemed to get angry. I didn't understand why, but she said sharply, "Just do what I've asked you to do." Her tone suddenly turned harsh and bitter, something I had never heard from her before. She was usually very polite and well-mannered, so I couldn't figure out why she was so upset that day. I didn't pay much attention to it at the time, and later explained to Catan, "For now, just complete your studies up to intermediate level. After that, you can decide what you want to become. You're still a child. You should focus only on your studies right now." Catan didn't talk much. Maybe he wasn't very expressive, or didn't like interacting with people. Perhaps it was just his nature. After that day, I never saw any strange drawings or lines in his notebooks again. It was Monday when I was about to leave for home. Suddenly, I felt as if someone called me from behind. When I turned around, there was no one there, but the voice sounded like a child's, and I could have sworn it was Catan's voice calling me, the same boy I taught every day. The next day, when I went to Catan's house for tuition, I was shocked to learn that he had a very high fever since the previous night. His mother told me, "He's not well. He's been running a fever since last night, so he won't be studying today." I said, "Let me just see him once and ask how he's feeling." But before I could go toward his room, his mother stopped me in a strange way. "He's sleeping," she said curtly. "And don't come tomorrow either." Come after 2 days, her behavior felt odd to me. But I quietly left the house, thinking to myself, Catan was perfectly fine just yesterday. Maybe it was just the weather that made him sick. He was a bit weak anyway, though such a sweet boy. When I got home, I saw my mother coughing badly and suddenly remembered that I had forgotten to bring her medicines. I immediately left again for the medical store. As I came down the stairs of the shop after buying the medicines, my foot slipped. I lost my balance and fell down the steps. When I looked up, I was shocked. Standing right in front of me was Catan's mother, the same woman whose son I tutored. I was surprised to see her there because she came from a wealthy family. So why was she buying medicines from this small, ordinary medical store? I couldn't stop myself from asking Catan's mother a question. I said, "You here? Is everything all right?" But it seemed like she didn't like me asking that. Startled, she snapped, "Why? Can't I come here? Am I not allowed?" Trying to calm the situation, I quickly said, No, that's not what I meant. It's just that I've never seen you here before. I come here often to buy medicines for my mother. I was just surprised to see you. Is Catan feeling better now?" At that, she said coldly, "You talk too much. You should learn to speak less." Saying that, she brushed past me and walked away. Her behavior struck me as very strange. How could she act like that with me? She had always been polite and kind before, but for the past 2 days, her attitude toward me had become extremely bitter. When I got home, my mother noticed that I seemed lost in thought and asked, "What happened, Rachna? Is something wrong?" I replied, "Nothing, Ma. It's just the mother of one of my students, Caden. I ran into her at the medical store today. She behaved very rudely with me. I don't understand why rich people are like this. They start earning money, get lost in their luxury, and forget about everything, even their children, who end up lost in life." My mother looked at me and said, "Ah, my dear, that's the thing about wealth. Rich people are like that. Once the greed for money takes over, all relationships are left behind. They become restless, desperate to get more and more money." I said, "I know, Ma, that money has great power. But how can anyone be so blinded by it that they practically turn into enemies of their own children? And if someone else tries to care for their children or show them affection, these rich people can't even tolerate that." My mother smiled and said, "That's exactly what I've been trying to explain to you, my daughter. These rich people don't just want wealth. They want to make people their own. Their goal is that once they have money, they can exercise power over others." I said, "Mom, God made us poor, but by God's grace, when Father was alive, we never faced any shortage of anything. After his death, our situation worsened. We may have become poor, but God has at least taught us the value of relationships." My mother smiled again. held my hand gently, and said, "All right, now take some rest. I'll bring you some food. You must be tired." Time kept passing like that. It was Wednesday when I noticed Katan, the boy I tutor, staring intently at a book for a long time. I looked at him angrily and said, "What are you doing? You're not paying attention to your studies. I've been asking you the same question for a while, and you still haven't answered me." Kaiten said, "Ma'am, if I give you an answer, you'll be happy. But it won't be right for me." "It could harm my health," I said. "Kaiten, what do you mean by that? And why do you talk about such deep things? You're just a child. You should focus on your studies and your games, not on such serious matters." "I don't understand what you're trying to say," I told him. "Explain it to me in simple words." Then Katan said, "I don't want to tell you anything." "That's enough for today, ma'am. I'm tired. We'll study the rest tomorrow," I said. "But Katan, your homework isn't finished yet." To this, Katan replied, "I already told you, that's enough for today." "Why are you arguing with me so much?" I said, "No matter what, I'm your teacher, and a teacher is like a mother. You shouldn't talk to me this way, it doesn't feel right." Katan looked at me angrily and said, "Don't you dare compare yourself to my mother. You're a very good person, and I respect you, but that doesn't mean you can try to take my mother's place. Because you never can." I looked at Kaiten in silence. His eyes and his words didn't seem to speak the same language. I quietly picked up my bag and was about to leave when suddenly I ran into Katan's mother. I greeted her politely, saying, "Namaste." She returned the greeting and said, "Here's your 1 month's advance fee. Don't come tomorrow. We'll be going somewhere." "Come the day after," I said gently. "That's fine. But the day after tomorrow, your son's tests are starting. I think he really needs to study. If he keeps taking breaks like this, he'll forget everything he's learned so far, and his marks will suffer." Hearing this, Katan's mother suddenly got angry. She said, "Oh girl, what's wrong with you? My son isn't studying to be a doctor. That missing one day will ruin him. He's still a child and in a lower class. A little break won't make a difference. And you don't need to act like his mother. There's no need to think so deeply about it." Hearing Katan's mother's words, I felt deeply embarrassed. How harshly this woman speaks, I thought. She went inside, leaving me standing there alone. All the way home, I kept thinking about what had happened and made up my mind that from now on, I would never interfere in the matters of rich people again. If Katan fails, then so be it. But I'll always regret it, because he's a very intelligent boy. With just a little more attention, he could have achieved great success. But since his mother didn't want that, there was nothing I could do, no matter how hard I tried. I started walking ahead, when suddenly, I felt as if someone had called out to me. I was about to get into a rickshaw when I felt it again. Someone calling my name. The sound made my chest tighten, like I couldn't breathe properly. I asked the rickshaw driver to stop and turned around, looking everywhere. Left, right, all around. But I couldn't see anyone who could have been calling me. I didn't understand why, but I kept feeling as though someone was calling out to me. And strangely, this only happened when I was leaving Katan's house after tutoring him. I tried to convince myself that maybe it was just my mother waiting for me at home. It would be around 8 p.m. by then. So perhaps that's why I was feeling restless. But even then, my heart wouldn't believe that it was just my imagination. Life kept moving on like this, until one day, a huge storm came into my life. I had never imagined that such a thing could ever happen to me. The next day, when I went to Katan's house to teach him, I was surprised to see a man sitting there. He was looking at me in a very strange way. I adjusted my dupatta, feeling uncomfortable. There was something in his eyes that made me feel this man was not a good person. I had never seen him in that house before. Who could he be? I wondered. Noticing my confusion, Kaiten said, "Ma'am, this is my father. He's usually away in other cities for work." Hearing that brought me some relief. Otherwise, I had been quite scared, wondering who that man was and why he was sitting there so casually. Anyone in my place would have felt the same suspicion. They all remained seated there, and I told Katan to bring his bag while I went into another room. I had been tutoring Catan in this house for 3 months, so I knew well enough that if his family was in the living room, I could take him to another room for lessons. I was teaching Catan when suddenly that man entered the room and sat down. His presence there felt very strange to me. He said, "Hello," and I replied politely. Then he asked, "My son doesn't trouble you, does he?" I've seen his progress report. His marks are very good. You're really teaching him well. The money we're paying for your tuition is truly worth it. I replied, "Yes, you're right. I take money for that very reason, to teach properly." He looked at me with an intense gaze, one I immediately understood. Just then, Catan's mother came into the room. She spoke with her husband for a bit and then took him out of the room. I couldn't understand the behavior of these people. I didn't know what they thought of themselves. Catan and I were studying again when that man came back into the room and said, "Teacher, if you ever need anything, please don't hesitate to tell me." I smiled politely and said, "No, I don't need anything. But if you leave the room, it'll be easier for me to teach Catan." As soon as I said that, the color of his face changed. Maybe he didn't like what I said. But what could I do? His presence was making it hard for me to teach. Still, he silently controlled himself, and I stayed calm, because I knew very well how to protect my dignity. I was still looking toward the door through which Catan's father had just left, when suddenly I heard that same voice again, the same one I'd heard 2 or 3 times before. I turned around, and I almost screamed. The child I was tutoring, Catan, was calling out to me in a strange, eerie way. I was starting to feel afraid of Catan. I said, "What's wrong with you, Catan? I'm sitting right here in front of you. Why are you calling me like that?" Catan replied, "I'm calling you because I need your help." But just as he was about to finish his sentence, his mother suddenly came into the room. The moment she entered, Catan fell completely silent. I noticed very clearly that he had stopped speaking because of her. I wanted to ask him what he was trying to say, but I couldn't. Catan's mother looked at me and said, "Please, teacher, don't take it the wrong way. My husband and I want to spend some time with our son. He's come home after a long time, so you can come tomorrow." That's enough for today. I was already mentally disturbed by everything that had happened, so I just wanted to leave Catan's house as quickly as possible. But as soon as I stepped out of the house, I heard that same calling voice again. This time, when I turned around, I became certain that something was definitely wrong. Because there, standing on the roof of his house, was Catan, the same boy I used to tutor, staring straight at me. At that moment, I realized it was never someone else calling me. It was Catan all along. I made up my mind that the next day, no matter what, I would find out the reason behind his calling. But I had to keep this to myself, especially from Catan's mother, because Catan always became quiet whenever she was around. Maybe he was like that because of his father's absence, I thought. That seemed possible, since today I had actually seen him smiling with his father. Usually, that boy was very serious. Perhaps his mother behaved too strictly with him when his father wasn't home. Then another thought crossed my mind. Maybe that woman wasn't his real mother at all, but his stepmother. The truth was, I didn't know much about that family. All I knew was that Catan's father worked in another city, mostly staying away from home, and his mother worked in some company. In all the months I'd been coming there, I had never seen any relatives or neighbors visiting their house. I was the only one who ever came, just to tutor Catan. Sometimes I felt that all rich people are the same, busy in their own worlds, never paying attention to their children. Maybe they actually prefer keeping their distance from everyone. So many questions kept spinning in my mind, all because of that one strange voice. I couldn't understand what difference it would even make if I did find out what was behind it all. Still, I knew I had to wait for the next day. If I got the chance, I would try to talk to Catan about it. But whenever I tried to have a conversation with him, his mother would enter the room before we could say anything. She was always hovering around, as if constantly watching over us. It seemed like she suspected that her son wanted to tell me something. That's why she kept such a close eye on him. I knew it wouldn't be easy. But one thing was clear to me: Catan might be in some kind of trouble. And maybe he was trying to reach out to me for help. I don't know what kind of thoughts I was creating in my mind, or what sort of plans I was making in my head. I had completely forgotten what was real and what wasn't, because in life, things are never the way they appear, and what appears to be true is rarely what it really is. But I had become emotionally attached to Catan. I could feel that he was caught up in some kind of trouble, and that he needed my help, but I had no idea what that trouble could be. The next day, I went to his house earlier than usual. I had finished teaching my other students quickly. When I reached Catan's house, I actually felt happy because he was completely alone at home that day. His parents had gone out shopping, after making sure that no one else was home except Catan, and that the maid had also left after seeing me arrive. I went straight to him. I said to him, "Now tell me honestly, why do you call out to me in such a soft voice when I'm leaving your house? And if you lie to me, when your mother comes back, I'll complain to her. I'll tell her how you call out to me from behind, while talking." I carefully watched his face. Its color kept changing. Looking at me very seriously, he said, "If you complain to my mother, and even if you tell her everything, she won't believe you. And then, like the previous 2 tuition teachers, you'll also lose this job. From what I know about you, you should care more about your salary than taking an interest in my life." I was shocked to hear such big words coming from such a young boy. But my question remained the same. I asked again, "Just tell me clearly, why do you call me?" He replied in a strange way, "Just understand this. The way you get paid for teaching me, I also get paid for calling you." I looked at him angrily and said, "Have you gone mad? What kind of things are you saying? What am I even asking you, and what are you answering me with?" Catan replied, "That's exactly what I'm saying. You came here to teach me, but instead of teaching, you've been calling out and making a fuss. Now I don't even understand what you're talking about." I felt like banging my head. How was this little boy twisting me around in his words like this? Before I could ask him anything more, I suddenly heard the horn of a car. It was Catan's parents' car, which meant they had come back. I opened the books and started teaching him, pushing all those thoughts out of my head. These people were driving me crazy. Maybe their aim was to confuse others with their talk. After teaching him, I went home, but I could not find peace. I thought about it all night. I knew Catan's behavior well enough, but there was something definitely off about his father. His father always stared at me in a very strange way, and his glances pricked me. My suspicion proved right the next day when I went to Catan's house to collect my salary. Instead of his mother, I saw Catan's father and I panicked, but then his expression surprised me. At that moment, I had urgent business. My mother had fallen ill, and I needed my salary for her treatment. I told this to Catan's father and was about to finish speaking when suddenly someone put a handkerchief over my mouth and I lost consciousness. When I came to, I was shocked to see that my hands and feet were tied. Seeing my hands and feet bound, I became extremely frightened. But as soon as I recognized the house, I was certain that I had gotten into serious trouble and had fallen victim to their plot, because this was none other than Catan's house. That meant his family had imprisoned me. But why? What did they want to do to me? My waist ached, and I realized I had been tied in the same position for a long time. I thought about my mother. She must be worried about me. It was night, and if I was late getting home, she would be upset, and her health was poor. Thinking of my mother, I began struggling against my bonds. Then suddenly, the door opened, and I was stunned to see who entered. It was Catan. There was a cloth tied over my mouth, so I couldn't make any sound. But that 14-year-old boy, Catan, suddenly seemed terrifying to me. His eyes, his movements, the way he looked at me, all of it revealed something dark. I knew that if I lost courage now, I would be in serious danger. I began struggling, shaking my hands and feet. He smiled, sat down in front of me, and peeled the tape off my mouth. In one breath I said, "Why have you locked me up here? What's wrong with you? Let me go. My mother must be worried sick about me." Hearing this, he laughed strangely and said, Oh, teacher, what's the hurry? Today, I finally have the chance to talk to you peacefully. He tried to touch my face, but I turned my head away. His attempt failed. The way he was talking disgusted me, not just because he had imprisoned me, but because when he used to come for tuition, he behaved with such manners. He was arrogant and stubborn, yes, but always spoke respectfully to me and chose his words carefully. Seriousness was part of his personality, but now everything was different. He stood before me like a grown man. Understanding the situation, I said firmly, "What do you want? And what is this you've done? I'm your teacher. I'm like your mother." Hearing that, he started clapping mockingly and burst out laughing like a madman. "Teacher," he said, "why do you keep talking about mothers? I don't even consider my real mother a mother. And you think you can become mine? You'll soon find out why I've kept you here." My heart cried for help. I wished someone would come to rescue me. I couldn't understand what was happening. I had never imagined something like this, not even in my worst dreams. Silently, I kept praying to God for help. After quite some time, the door opened, and when I saw who entered, I realized things had gone completely out of my control. It was Katan's father, and he was staring at me with the same disturbing expression as his son. I was not prepared for what was happening, and worse, I already had a dreadful sense of what they were planning to do to me. Still, something inside me kept pushing me to hold on to courage and hope. I folded my hands before Keaton's father and pleaded, "Please let me go." "Why have you locked me up here?" He too said the same thing as Keaton. "You'll find out soon enough." Saying this, both father and son walked out of the room and disappeared from the camera's view. As soon as they left, 2 large rats suddenly came into the room. The moment I saw them, I screamed in terror. The rats seemed to notice me. They looked hungry, as if they hadn't eaten in days. And then they began biting me. I screamed as loudly as I could. My cries must have reached those men, but both father and son sat outside like stones. From outside, I could hear the loud sound of the television playing, as if they had turned it up just to drown out my screams. The thought of what these people really wanted to do with me made me restless with fear. While struggling, I moved so much that the chair I was tied to toppled over, and suddenly the rats ran away. But they had already bitten my legs badly, leaving wounds that caused unbearable pain. Before I could recover from that agony, the door opened again, and both father and son came back inside. In their hands were 2 large bottles filled with several black rats. The moment I saw that, I screamed with all my strength. I was sure this was the end, that I was about to die. My entire body was drenched in sweat. As soon as they opened the bottles, I fainted. When I opened my eyes next, I found myself back at my own home. For a long time, I couldn't understand what had happened. Suddenly, a sharp pain in my head made me realize that there was a bandage wrapped around it. When I opened my eyes, I saw my mother sitting beside me, and right next to her was another woman, Keaton's mother, the wife of that cruel man and the mother of that cruel boy. The moment I saw her, I started screaming loudly. Seeing my condition, both my mother and that woman became anxious. Keaton's mother tried to calm me down by holding my hand, but I jerked her hand away and clung tightly to my mother. I was terrified of that woman, afraid she might throw rats at me again. That woman folded her hands before me and said, "I am deeply ashamed. My husband is mentally ill. I don't know why he takes pleasure in hurting others. He was receiving treatment in another country, and I thought he had recovered. But it seems my son has inherited the same illness. When we returned from the market, I heard your screams. You had already fainted. I brought you back here. Please forgive me. I have sent both my husband and my son to a mental asylum where they are receiving full treatment. I am truly sorry. These are some funds for your medical care. I hope you can forgive me. You'll never face any trouble from our family again." After she left, I sat trembling with fear for a long time. For days, I lived under that same feeling of dread, but gradually, I began to return to normal life. It has now been 4 years since that incident. I am married now, but even today, whenever I see a rat, I can't forget that horrifying night. Nothing like that ever happened to me again, but I could never have imagined something so terrible would happen in the first place. Sometime later, I happened to pass by that same street and learned that Ketan's mother was seriously ill and hospitalized. Ketan and his father had completely lost their sanity. Hearing this made me feel deeply sad. But even today, I thank God that He kept me safe, made me a healthy human being, and taught me how to live life again. My life is good now. By God's grace, everything is fine. My husband is a wonderful man, and my mother lives with us too. Since that day, I lived my life with great fear. But slowly, God changed everything. I met the man who is now my husband. He, too, is a tuition teacher, and he has a good job at a school. He liked me and soon sent a marriage proposal to my house, and that's how we got married. He told me that he would treat my mother as his own and give her a place in our home just like his own mother. Since he had lost his parents, he considered my mother to be his. Even today, I still feel afraid of people like Ketan and his father, but by God's grace, I'm slowly forgetting everything and moving on. Friends, I hope you liked our story. If you enjoyed it, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to press the notification bell so you'll be the first to get the next update.